There was a woman in our village named Tsuru. She lived past 100. I don't know the exact number. She had stopped counting somewhere around 95, she said, because counting felt like waiting. She had a garden with bitter melon and purple sweet potato, and every morning, without exception, she walked to her neighbor Fumiko's house, and they ate breakfast together. Not always something special. Rice, miso, pickled radish, but together, every morning for decades until Fumiko passed. And after that, Tsuru began to slow. Not all at once, but we noticed it. We all noticed it. I was a young woman then, and I didn't understand why. I thought perhaps it was the grief. But now, I have lived long enough to know it was more than that. The grief was part of it, but there was something else that left with Fumiko. Something that had been keeping Tsuru alive in a way that no medicine could name. We called it moai. You may not have heard this word. It does not translate well. Some people say it means meeting for a common purpose, but that is too clean, too official. In Okinawa, moai was simply this: a small group of people who showed up for each other, who ate together, who knew your business, who would notice if you weren't there, who would come to your door if 3 days passed and no one had seen you. I have been part of a moai since I was a young girl. My mother put me in one. She didn't ask if I wanted to. She just brought me to the neighbor's house one afternoon and said, "These are your people now." I didn't know until much later what she was giving me. In Okinawa, we have always known, though we never had a word for the science of it, that eating alone is not just a sadness, it is a kind of danger, a slow one, the kind that doesn't show up on any scan, doesn't ring any alarm, but quietly does its work over years and years. My mother would have said it in simpler terms. A person who eats alone forgets what they are eating for. Now the doctors have given it a name. Loneliness, they say, raises the level of cortisol in the body. That is the stress hormone, the one that stays elevated when the body believes it is under threat. And when cortisol stays high for a long time, it damages the heart. It hardens the blood vessels. It disrupts sleep. It weakens immunity. It inflames things inside you that should not be inflamed. They say the health risk of being chronically lonely is similar to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. 15! I didn't believe it the first time I read it. I had to read it again. 15 cigarettes from nothing more than being alone. I am not telling you this to frighten you. I am telling you because I spent most of my life not knowing the mechanism, only the truth. And now that I know both, I want you to understand what I understood late, that the table is medicine. Who sits at it with you is medicine. The act of being witnessed, of being expected, of having someone who will ask where you were if you don't come, that is medicine. There is something that happens in the body when we share a meal, not just in the heart, though it is there too, in the gut. The vagus nerve, a long, wandering nerve that runs from your brain all the way down through your chest and into your stomach, is active during connection. When you feel safe, when you are with people you trust, the vagus nerve slows the heart, lowers blood pressure, and tells the digestive system that it is permitted to rest and receive nourishment. When you eat alone in silence, especially if you are already anxious or grieving, the body stays in a different state. The food goes in, but the body is not fully open to it. My mother never knew the word vagus nerve, but she knew that a person eating alone over a pot of rice looks different from a person eating with family. She could see it in the face, in the way the shoulders sat, in whether the food was finished or left. This is what I have thought about in my old age. All the things she knew without the science. and all the things the science now confirms. The moai, our little group, met every week, sometimes more. We would share food. Sometimes we pooled money to help a member in crisis. One year, one of our women needed surgery and had no way to pay. The moai covered it. No one made a speech about it. Someone just brought an envelope. That is how it worked. You didn't have to ask. They already knew. But it wasn't only the money. It was the structure. It gave us a reason to leave the house. It gave us people who would notice our faces, who could see when something was wrong before we said a word. I have known women in my moai who were going through sickness and didn't say anything, but someone in the group would arrive at their door with food before they had to ask. Because she had been quiet at the last gathering, because her eyes looked tired, because someone was paying attention. After my husband died, I will not dwell long on this, but I want to say it. The moai is what kept me here. Not in a dramatic way. I didn't think about not being here, but there was a weight that first winter, a heaviness that I think could have settled in and stayed permanently if I had been alone with it. Instead, on Thursday mornings, I had somewhere to go. Someone expected me. Someone would ask how I slept. And somehow, in being asked small questions by people who genuinely wanted the answer, I began to feel that I was still part of the world. They have done studies, long studies in many countries, on what keeps people well into old age. Not what keeps them alive the longest, but what keeps them functioning, clear-minded, physically strong. And the results, when you strip everything else away, are almost embarrassingly simple. Purpose, movement, food that is close to the earth, and connection. Real connection, not the kind that comes through a screen, not the kind where you are seen but not known, but the kind where someone has watched you change over decades and loves you anyway, where your grief is not performed for an audience, where your joy is witnessed without envy. In Okinawa, we grew up inside this. It was not something we had to build as adults because it was woven into the daily life before we were old enough to understand what we had: the moai, the communal kitchen fires, the neighbors who walked in without knocking, the grandmothers sitting together sorting beans, the children eating at whatever table they happened to be near at mealtime. When younger people visit from the cities sometimes, they say the village feels strange to them. Too close, they say. Everyone in everyone's business. I understand what they mean. But I also think they have confused intimacy with intrusion. They are not the same. In our village, when someone is in your business, it means they noticed you. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. I worry sometimes about the way people eat now, alone in front of a screen, standing over a sink, in a car, in an office at a desk without looking up. I am not saying this to judge anyone. I understand that life moves differently than it used to, that the structure that held us together in Okinawa was not something we chose so much as something we were born inside of. But I do wonder what it costs, over time, over years. I wonder what it costs the body and the mind and the part of a person that needs to be known by someone. There is a particular kind of loneliness that is hardest to see. It is not the loneliness of having no one. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling like no one truly sees you. I have heard this from women in cities who have hundreds of people in their phones, but cannot name one person who would notice if they disappeared for a week. That is its own kind of hunger, and the body feels it the same way it feels the other kind. So what do I say to this? I am an old woman. I cannot give you a moai if you don't have one. I cannot recreate what took generations to build in a single conversation, but I can tell you what my mother told me, which is simpler than any of this. Find your people and eat with them regularly. It does not need to be a ceremony. It does not need to be a full meal. It can be tea. It can be soup. It can be whatever is in the pot. But sit down together, without phones, without hurry, and ask someone a real question, and then wait for the answer. Do this every week with the same people consistently for years. Let it become the kind of thing that would be noticed if it stopped. Let it become the kind of thing that pulls you out of bed on a cold morning when you would rather stay under the blankets. That is the medicine. It sounds too simple. That is always how the real things sound. Tsuru lived past 100, as I said. When I asked her once what she thought the secret was, I was young and still believed there was a single answer. She looked at me in a way that was kind but also a little impatient, the way grandmothers look when they are trying not to say that you have asked a foolish question. Then she said, "I always had somewhere to go in the morning." I have thought about that sentence ever since, how small it sounds, how large it actually is. Check in on the people in your life, not through a screen if you can help it, in person, at a table, with something warm to drink. If you have been eating alone for a long time, consider that this is something you could gently begin to change. It doesn't have to be dramatic. One meal, one friend, one regular morning. Start there. I'm going to pour the rest of this tea while it's still warm. Come back next week. I'll be here.